Welcome to our latest Great Reset Roundtable edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Chris Cordani. If you enjoy our content, hit that like button. Also, comment, share, and subscribe to enjoy a sneak preview of our videos, exclusive content, and more special programming in the works. Join our Patreon page, patreon.com/thought-to-action. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Getter, and our website, londoncenter.org. Check out our Thought to Action Teespring store. We have a lot of cool stuff there. The link to that is in our video and podcast descriptions. Members of the World Economic Forum flew in from all over the world in private jets and enjoyed a large energy-consuming conference recently at a luxury ski resort to dictate to the rest of us how we should ration our energy and other resources in order to give them more power through both the Great Reset and Agenda 2030. While media members flailed in the recent past to run defense against those exposing the World Economic Forum's plans, the group of elites no longer bothers hiding its intentions, often taking a rather braggadocious tone. One example from the most recent gathering is a boastful announcement by Alibaba Group President J. Michael Evans. He introduced a new initiative, an individual carbon footprint tracker. He expects the tech to be ready soon. These people need to be stopped. So with us on our Great Reset Roundtable are London Center for Policy Research President Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, London Center for Policy Research Distinguished Fellow Navy Captain Pete O'Brien, and London Center Senior Fellow Jay Homnick. Evans, in his arrogance, gentlemen, said of the carbon footprint tracker, what does it mean? Where they're traveling, how they're traveling, what they're eating, what they're consuming on the platform. Tony, this is what he has in mind for the they, which means, of course, us outside their circle.
So let's break this down into the components that I think are best understood. First, the fundamental premise that he's putting forth is that CO2 is bad. Let me point out to our audience that CO2 is simply a gas that is exchanged in biological activities on this planet that has been something going on for literally billions of years. And at times, CO2 has been greater, sometimes it's been lesser, but it's always been a necessary component to help with the biology of plants and animals. It's science. CO2 is plant food, to put it in layman's terms. For plant life to exist, to grow, to mature, to provide sustenance. For those vegans who love to talk about plant-based diets, CO2 is critical to that. CO2 is not the boogeyman that the left has made it out to be. And there's been studies suppressed over the past 50 years that have failed to recognize the fact that places like interstate highways, where you have emissions coming out of cars, which increases CO2, the result of CO2 increase is more plant life. Now, the left, if you look at what they say is, oh, well, this may be true, but it's not as cut and dry as conservatives make it out to be. Yeah, it kind of is. If you want to have less carbon, you grow more plants. You're not going to be able to actually curb carbon when natural sources of carbon still are greater than what man puts out. And I loved how the left tries to say, oh, it's all mankind. It's like, no, it's not all mankind. Last time I checked, volcanoes, every time they erupt, puts out huge amounts of CO2. And there's not a darn thing we can do about that. So I think that's the first thing. It's like they want you to believe that CO2 is evil. Well, let's look at part two of that. Part two of their concept is because CO2 is evil, it is a dangerous pollutant. They call it a pollutant. We must ask you if you're going to be a good human being who's concerned about the well-being of not only you and your family, but the human race. You've got to actually let us help you help the human race by allowing us, the Great Reset team, to track everything you're doing. so we can help you better manage your horrible outputs of CO2. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince you and I that somehow our normal day-to-day activities of living, where we do put off a certain amount of CO2, we breathe oxygen, we drive cars. Some of us used to drop napalm on targets, but that's another story for another day. Let's not go down that path. But the idea is, and that does provide a lot of CO2 in that, just saying, but I don't want to get into that. But my point being is that they want you to be convinced that somehow you're living your life, that you have basically signed up, not by any fault of your own. It's not your fault that you are a pollutant monster that needs to be monitored. Therefore, we have the answer. And that brings me to part 3, the solution. Their supposed solution is to give you technology, probably in your phone, something to hook you up. And I've not read it yet, but I don't know if it's going to go into any orifices. I don't think so, but you never can tell with the left. They are the party of gerbils, just saying. The idea that somehow your life becomes reduced to a series of zeros and ones on a device, that they then allow you the great privilege of sharing with them every aspect of your life for purposes of helping to advise you on how to reduce the evil output that you do regarding CO2. What they don't say, obviously, in any of this, is it's not about the CO2. It's not about gas. It's not about anything. It's about that relates to science. This is about essentially another form of control of how they would get a hold of your data to truly monitor everything you do, to digitally enhance their understanding of you, build an icon of your life, essentially an avatar, and then use that for purposes of manipulation, control, and degrading your ability to exercise freedoms. That's it. That's what's going on here. This has nothing to do with anything good. It has to do with everything that they're trying to do to impose a large fascistic political will on everybody so that you become nothing more than a digitized icon that they can use and manipulate for purposes of their larger scheme of world governance. Build back better. You will own nothing and be happy. That's where they're going with this, for the idea that you cannot be trusted to run your own life. They will help you. And this personal tracker, the CO2 personal tracker, is going to be their tool to get inside of your house, your life, and then help advise you on how to stop being evil by producing CO2. Is that a good enough summary of what's going on?
Yeah, we're pretty horrible, aren't we?
We're terrible. We are terrible.
We'll have to hold our breath every time one of our other gentlemen here talks.
To that point, Chris,
yeah.
Let me say that, Chris. Remember, if you hold your breath long enough, you turn blue. The Democrat Party, just saying. So maybe that's
a good point. Yeah, you have to suffocate yourself and lose some brain
maybe.
cells. I get that. Maybe. Yes, understandable.
Well, I think there's several points that we have to acknowledge. One is that this debate is basically been declared over. So really, for us to say that they're using the wrong information, that's kind of passé. They declared victory. Essentially, the entire world agrees with them, except for the American electorate. And they've come to the realization that the American electorate is not that important, because they can win elections other ways, and then once they're in, they can join all the international conferences and play the game. So it's a fascinating situation where we've already been defeated. The facts it's all considered fact already. It's not a debate anymore. So in the early 2000s, I wrote a lot of essays, and if you go on these aggregated websites, you see a lot of my material against global warming, but it's all like from 2002 to 2005. after a while, I said, all right, I said whatever there is to say, and I give up because they all declared victory. And like I said, they've won every single frontier except the American electorate. And the American electorate is always very narrow in favor of common sense. And that's really the last stronghold there is in the world. And they can basically ignore us, as I say. They can do all these international conferences, especially when there's a Democrat president, pretend that we don't exist. And that's how they move the agenda forward.
First, something specific on what Jay has said, which I think is really important, is the issue of, from the perspective of the folks at Davos and the perspective of the folks who are making these decisions, who are flying around, by the way, in beautiful jets, leaving truly tremendous carbon footprints.
Tons.
The carbon footprint of John Kerry from flying from New York to Paris probably exceeds the average American's carbon footprint for any given decade.
Well, John Kerry's special. Remember that? He said he was special.
I'm sorry. Right. My apologies. But the issue here is fascinating, is that the few countries that are being told that their personnel, that their people have to give up certain things, the Americans and a few other, the Koreans, the Japanese, very heavily industrialized, very productive countries, and everybody else, they're just continuing along merrily as they were, so we're the ones taking it on the chin, so that they can establish this spectacular level of control that Tony mentions, and I think that's the thing we really need to look at here, because this is about control. And the level of control here that's being generated is truly tremendous. It's not about carbon footprints, it's about data streams. It's about data streams that gather in everything that you're doing in life. Every single credit card usage, every single movement, your car, when your car or your cell phone move, or your car and cell phone, as the case may be, that GPS data is going to be compiled. It's already been tried a couple of times in one of the legislatures out west. I believe it was Oregon, but don't hold me to that. A couple of years ago, tried to get a bill put passed in a congressman introduced it, didn't get anywhere, but their idea was that every car produced after a given year, I think it was at the time, I think it was 2014, would have to have a main data bus on it. The point of a main data bus is that every single thing in your car that happens was going to go onto that data bus and would be essentially stored. And their idea was that it would be downloaded when you went in for your annual safety inspection. And based upon that data stream, they would level a road use tax on you. So instead of the road use tax on your gasoline being paid through gasoline, your road use tax would be charged to you predicated upon what roads you drove on, how often, and when.
Yep.
But the point here is that they were going to provide to the government a tracker of everything you had done with your car over the year. And in fact, interestingly enough, it would provide them with the data to tell them when every time that you had exceeded the speed limit. So you would be essentially reporting on yourself. This it didn't pass this time. It is in fact written into the law now that every car by, I believe it's 2030, has to have a remotely accessed kill switch, which means actually the way that's being implemented is again through a data bus, but it allows the police to turn off your car if they want. The idea here is that they're gaining greater and greater control over what we have and what we do, and all of this data, this being the other part of this, all of this data is being kept. No one's getting rid of your credit card purchases last year. Right. That data is here. That data is stored someplace. Everything you bought, when you bought it, the exact time that you bought it, all of that is available. And all of that is being compiled by these few very large corporations that very often are acting in concert with the government in order to establish a picture of you, individually of you. And the trend line here is tremendous. When you add in what is going on, the Chinese have already mastered some of this technology. When you add in what the more advanced computers, AI as it's referred to, the Chinese now have AI enhanced imaging systems that will allow them to identify an individual based upon his walk, based upon his the shape of his body, the shape of his head, how he is moving, the size, and so that they can look at someone and they don't need to see your face, they don't need to hear your voice, and they can identify you and keep track of you. And they have, in the case of the Uyghurs out in Xinjiang province, they have AI-enabled systems that will take an imagery of someone, and if the beard is too long, that is grounds for being questioned because that individual may be a practicing Muslim. That's the level of access that's already been built. And if you don't understand that what's going on here is there will be people in this country, there will be organizations in this country that will want to get a hand of that very same technology and use it in the very same way.
Right.
And there's a very important point that I think needs to be added to that, which is that, see, the Chinese do not need global warming to get the control. They have it already on their people. And originally, when we started making noise about global warming, they were resisting. And then they figured out that it's not in their interest to resist because we're never going to check on them. We don't have the power to check on them. Well, and at the same time, if our governments get more control on our people, that's actually in their interest because the freedom is their enemy. So they figure, so there's this kind of unholy alliance, unspoken obviously, but one of these conspiracies that emerges just from where, conjoined interests, where China is willing to go along with all the global warming stuff and the restrictions because they don't have to keep it. And they don't need the control anyway. And that allows Europe and these other places to gain the control. And at the end of the day, again, the United States is the only last little bit of a holdout, and only when, to the extent that the Republicans and Libertarians can hang on to a little wedge of power, but that's about what's left.
And to expand on that point, the whole climate fraud movement has been established for purposes of not only what we're seeing here, but the idea is to use, and I think this is one of the most evil aspects of it, to Jay's point, they want to basically use people's good nature against them. That is to say, they've wanted to create this narrative that, your actions are harming the planet, therefore you're part of the problem, and we will help you become part of the solution by joining this collective to, quote unquote, stop global warming. Global warming doesn't exist. If you actually look at the data that's outside of the East Anglican university and the man hockey stick, which doesn't really exist, get past all the faux data they have out there, the planet is behaving normally within the parameters of geologic time. I encourage anyone who wants to understand the planet to actually study something called geologic time. And you tell me why there was a boring billion years where there's high CO2, minimum change in life, and how we influence that, because we kind of weren't there. So I'm just trying to point out that what they've done is created this whole facade of we have damaged the environment, therefore, because we know you're good people, you want to do something to help, you can help us help you by giving up control of your life. That's it.
People are easily led. That's another problem too. If you I was educated in elementary school in the 1970s when a lot of this was started, some of this PC education. Part of it was how bad global warming was. Global warming was the worst thing in the world. We didn't have climate change back then. It was always global warming. Then it changed to global cooling, maybe some 20 years later. Then it became climate change. It all depends on who's in charge.
Always something, right?
And what kind of control they want. The fact is, it all leads up to what they were discussing in Davos very recently: energy rationing. And if you think that's bad enough, we also know the authoritarian left has been tossing around the idea of a China-style social credit system.
Oh, yeah.
You guys discussed that a little bit before, but the potential of its use in conjunction with an energy allowance is not out of the realm of possibility. And I do remember a certain president, I believe his name rhymes with Lobama, was discussing the idea of water rationing in showers. I mean, maybe in passing, but this is the mentality of these people. To put it into perspective, we talked about the private jets flying to Davos and wasting all sorts of energy. Is J. Paul Evans has a 12,000 square foot fuel sucking oceanside mansion in the Hampton, and they're telling us how to use our energy, and they're going to use the power of a possible power of a social credit system, but at least internet shaming and the social media shaming situation is a very easy way to lead a lot of the masses, because people don't want to seem like bad people or unhip. And when somebody says something, the mob will just, something against the narrative, the mob will just jump on you like the old Puritans did in early America. This is a problem, but this is what the Agenda 2030 and Great Reset people are taking advantage of.
So to that point, I think a lot of the folks who follow us have seen us go through and talk about the censorship issue. So part of the necessity, Chris, to be successful in their effort to frame a debate has to be the removal of any discourse relating to alternate views. And again, I've got a degree in environmental studies. There are true environmental issues we should be focused on. The idea of plastics being massively introduced into the environment, both from the perspective of how it's affecting our food supply. There's not a day goes by that we don't ingest plastic, but we don't understand long-term effects of that, or plastic disposal, where it goes in the environment. The issue of what is truly going on relating to the sun and climate change. How do we best actually make good recommendations for energy production? Fusion energy, the one true source of unlimited natural, completely clean energy remains fusion, if we could ever break the code on it. Talk about massive change in a good way for society. These are all things that, as an environmental scientist, if you will, I am all for. But we're distracted from that purpose of actually doing real environmental work by this idea that carbon is evil. If you do not accept carbon as that Satan of our time, there's something wrong with you, and you must volunteer to give up your stuff, your information. And that, Chris, that's the point that I think both Pete and Jay have made. We have a system that does not allow them to just simply dictate you will give this up. So instead, they're trying to trick us into believing that our giving up our rights and protecting our data and our patterns is the right thing to do for purposes of being a good person. And I think that's what we need to recognize here. This is not about being a good person. This is about fundamentally giving up a great deal of your constitutional rights. If you give them the information, they can do whatever they want with it. And they know that. And that's why they're trying right now so hard to get you to volunteer to be a good person and allow them access to your life.
And for no real gain. It's just a fantasy.
Well, how do you lead people? That's the big question. This is all about manipulation and telling them, hey, we're going to protect you. You'll be considered a better person than everyone else.
They're not going to. Well, that's the thing. They're being protected from something that does not exist.
Right. But the fact is, they want to make you feel good. It's that dopamine thinking. Oh, I'm smug now. I can feel better than everybody else because I am energy efficient. I am doing my best to lower my carbon footprint because that's what the Davos people want. Well, what they're really doing is grooming people into compliance. That's what they're doing. It's a long, again, from the 70s onward, this is a long period of grooming. It's not new. In order for free societies to succumb to any compliance of an Agenda 2030 or Great Reset, there must be ways to monitor, track down, and hyper-regulate their citizens. And they have to groom. Global surveillance system. We almost, kids don't read maps anymore. We all rely on GPSs. That's how we can be tracked down rather easily. Australia's eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant called for a recalibration of human rights to counter internet wrongthink. And I believe there was also a proposal by the World Economic Forum or members of it to have UN passports for the metaverse. Anything to track us down, but to make sure we're safe or out of a matter of convenience.
Well, that's the point, Chris. They try to tell you that disinformation, they protect you from that for your own good. They now want to have access to the way you shop and how you shop because, gee, we want to make the experience better. It's all nonsense. And I think it's something that Pete and I actually warned senior Pentagon leadership about. I was looking back at it today, 6 years ago. We had come to a conclusion through our own completely independent analysis that we were going to see very quickly, very soon, which is very soon now, an environment where a digitized version of us, individuals, will be built and has been built for purposes of manipulation. And they all exist already. And this is the thing, too. We keep trying to warn people, and more to come on that, because I think we want to give people tools on how to figure out how to stop it or manage it. But eBay, Amazon, all these big corporations have built a virtual you with or without your approval. Your simple act of shopping, of clicking online, has allowed them to essentially model your behavior. That behavior modeling is what the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is now banking on for a global system of control that goes beyond simple point and click actions to actually then start affecting how you think, who you think with, and what you're willing to do or not do relating to behavior. It's very much a danger, a existential threat to America by the fact that I think foreign forces will try to manipulate individuals to go and vote against their own interests. And that may sound paranoid, but I don't think it is based on everything I'm seeing going on right now.
And there's a great deal of it, Tony, that is insidious. One of the things that constantly reemerges in sort of the second tier discussions, and it has been chewing away at the world for a while, is the issue of cash.
Yeah,
is the idea that everything should be done by credit card. And in fact, now if you look at the credit card companies, they're all talking about they want to get rid of the actual card. They want to go to an app that you will load onto your cell phone, and you won't use your credit card. You'll be there on your cell phone, and you won't need a wallet. You won't need credit cards because it's all right there. And what that really translates into is a complete mastery of the data stream, and turn it around. Now, it's been decided that you are just a horribly bad person. Tony is a bad person. He drives his car everywhere. He sits around. He idles the engine. He produces all sorts of extra carbon dioxide. Tony's driving too much. So the next time Tony heads off someplace and just go drive around. Evil Tony driving up and down the highway. Tony pulled into the gas station. They only allow him to have $5 worth of gas.
That's right. Or worse, that they can pull you in if you volunteer to give them access to let them monitor your CO2 expenditure. You give them the right to question, why are you driving? Is this necessary? Who are you meeting with? Why did you have to do this? Why can't you actually ride with someone else? There's all these very intrusive things you open the door for the moment you give them the right to monitor and control what you're doing.
And the other approach, I know Jay wanted to say something, but let me just jump in here. One of the other things that the avenue to gain this level of control is health and safety.
Right.
Exactly. So security, health, safety, and of course, convenience.
Yes, absolutely. The idea that we have to do this because it's the healthy thing. everybody has to wear a mask, everybody has to stay inside because of monkeypox. What? But in fact, there was a comment out of the CDC yesterday that we should be wearing masks for monkeypox. So monkeypox
that's beyond insane, since it's not transmitted via the air.
Some idiot made a comment yesterday that maybe we should be wearing masks again for monkeypox.
I was told to wear a paper bag, but I guess that's a different story.
I've been told to carry bananas so I know if someone's infected because I'll grab them away from them.
The fact is, we all have a military background to one extent or another.
Right.
And the way military works is that both sides are strategizing how to win. And both sides have some kind of plan. But in this proto-military political realm where the leftists are always looking to gain ground, the rightists do not have a plan to win. So they're just on defense, and they're just trying to get at a thing. So to take this example, let's say with the cold fusion. We all have this idea that Tony expressed earlier that if you figured out cold fusion and you could basically turn water into run a car on water, in Japan, they already flew a plane on water for 100 miles. So if we get to that point, we win. No, it's not true, because we haven't war gamed it out. We don't have a strategy to make sure we win. These guys are all way ahead of us. So China will steal it. They'll sabotage it. They'll claim that this is causing a new kind of global warming, and they'll figure out a way how to not let you use it, even if you get it.
That's like nuclear energy.
Yeah.
Right? Tony, you say it all the time. The cleanest energy we can come up with is nuclear energy. Right?
So they figured out a way how to convince us not to use it.
By all measures, yes.
Here's something I'm very surprised about. Hollywood, gentlemen. Because all these Hollywood celebrities we must stop global warming. We have to lower our carbon footprint. Drive electric cars. I would think that Hollywood would be against those electric cars, because imagine the car chase movies later on and the tank movies and things like that on electric vehicles. How boring would that be?
It's the scene from Seinfeld with the old people chasing each other in a little car.
I love that with George. Yeah, George being chased on his hover round.
That's right. That's right.
The hover round. Yes.
Hover rounds.
So, that's the point. But Chris, and we need to do we're going to do an expanded a dive into this. The London Center is regarding pop culture in Hollywood. This relates to it because they're hypocrites, because they're paid to basically read lines and pretend that they're somehow virtuous. That's why. Because look at every movie today that has like Fast and Furious. Could you imagine Fast and Furious with Priuses? I'm serious.
Moderately slow.
Diesel, oh, look out, I'm going to break 65 miles an hour here. Hold on.
Slow and slightly peeved.
Close the sunroof.
No, actually.
Go to 70.
Actually, when it's slow, it's much more furious. Everyone is really
there'd be a lot of I agree. There'd be a lot of road rage. So maybe that does make a lot of sense.
But and same with guns. I mean, there's a number of very popular movies out there. Red, everybody ends up dead in that. Pretty much better dead than red, I guess. Anyway, but they shoot each other incessantly, which I would argue it's like I'm not for all that violence because it's not realistic. I think it instills the wrong values in young people, and it actually does not produce anything of worth. And I think it's because they make money off of it, and it's something that they don't care. They care about only when they're being influenced to say or do something by someone who wants to pay them. There's very few exceptions. There are exceptions to that. I know a few actors who don't do that. But for the most part, they make their money from virtue signaling, and the bigger the virtue signal, the more they make money. So
they pretend they don't like guns and they shoot guns.
Right.
They pretend they don't like to smoke, and they're all smoking through all the scene. It's just a trick. Like you have to pay your word tax. You got to say a few words, and then you can do whatever you want.
So.
Or else you don't get work, and that might be the Hollywood social credit.
Well, see, that's part of the deal, and that we're seeing now. It's a double-edged sword. All these things we're talking about regarding control, because the WEF and the Alibaba guy gets control of our data. At the same time, the very existence of the internet has allowed for the veneer of Hollywood and the control of images to be eroded. I nominate for you again the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp trial. The veneer of their stardom is gone. And most stars are just like these people. Let me tell you, I've known a few. They are, there's a great line from a Talking Heads song, scumbags and superstars. Basically, they're pretty much the same, just saying. And I think we've seen this on display. So as much as the image of the stars in the old days was very much controlled by a handful of publicists, Rock Hudson being, this manly man. And, I'm not here to judge who you sleep with. I don't care. But I'm just saying that the images of stars were very carefully controlled back in the old days. They had the same issues. Marilyn Monroe dying theoretically from a drug overdose, just maybe, these things were all controlled. Now, because of an emergence of digital producers, online producers, you have the potential of getting around that veneer. And I would argue we have to look at the same thing to continue to get information out regarding the World Economic Forum. It's like, these are not the solutions you're looking for. You need to look past them and allow for information to get out around the legacy media and those outlets who are trying to push this World Economic Forum.
It's worth pointing back. It's worth pointing out, Tony, too, is that the holier than thou fellows, men and women, who wind up at Davos, like to put themselves off as holier than thou,
right?
But they are not substantially different than the folks you find in Hollywood
right.
when it comes to their personal behavior, and or for that matter, except in fairly narrow areas, their levels of intelligence.
Right. I mean, the virtue signaling is not new now. It's just different. I cite for you, there's nobody Catholic here, right? I cite for you Pope Pius and his Vatican orgies. Not that I'm saying it was right or wrong. I'm just saying it was, you could, what was that? They would sell something and say you could sin. What was that term? They would sell
indulgences.
That's it, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to have an orgy? Sure. Just give us some money. We're okay. God's okay. You're okay. We're okay. Just hand over the cash. So it was the same thing back then. It's just now it's done with a technology format that we're all more familiar with. So
except that these guys don't realize they're right behind them are the real bad guys.
It's
so that
true.
the minute the Chinese take over, all those rich guys aren't rich anymore, and everything changes.
Well, we should also be taking the stories that are coming out of and surrounding the Bilderberg Group very seriously, because this is true. This is, again, a lot of things people discuss, and media types and powerful types are quick to deny and step in and say, hey, wait, we're running defense. These are conspiracy theories. Nothing happens. The fact is, these people meet every year, okay? You have the people in the World Economic Forum who are really out in the open about what they're doing now because, hey, they don't care. People seem to be on their side. At least that's what they think.
No, but they have actual power.
But what bothers me is they're open about all that stuff. What are they not open about, or what are some of these people not open about behind closed doors at the Bilderberg meetings?
Well, I could tell you something came up on one of our interviews today, but it would get me banned and get me censored again too. But
awesome.
No, I mean, we all have theories. I have theories, And look, why have they not released the Epstein client list? Just saying,
I like that Elon Musk asked the question.
Yeah.
By the way, Elon Musk did not commit suicide.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm kidding.
So no, I think there's a whole level greater of evil that we just don't know about. They're more than happy to talk about all this because they think that we're stupid, and that we're going to, we want to make the world better, so we're going to help them fight carbon. That darn carbon, man, it's everywhere.
You just used the important word there, Tony, and people don't like to use this word in public a lot, but the important word here is evil. And
it is evil.
What we're talking about here is not about carbon or about our health or about social well-being or being altruistic or anything. What we're talking about here is concentrations of power. And you know, the more power people get, the more power they want. Lord Acton was right, by the way, going back to what Tony was just talking about. Lord Acton, specifically, when he said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, had taken as part of his study into the abuse of power, had taken it from a study of the corrupt popes of the early Renaissance. So that this is not a new thing that happens with mankind. This has been going on probably since about the first building of the first pyramid, but it is very real, and the folks at Davos are no different than any of the other people who have tried to garner power.
So last time I checked, I have an actual degree in political science, and political science 110. I will never forget, to Pete's point. And I'll give credit where credit is due. Dr. Jim Jacob, God bless you, Jim, wherever you're at, basically broke down this I think it was 6 or 7 week course into 2 sections: power and order. That's it. He talked about power from the perspectives of what Pete just outlined, relating to the spectrum of what nations use to acquire, maintain, and exercise power. And we're talking about a spectrum of issues relating from economic to war, all that stuff. That was the first half of the quarter. Second half of the quarter was order. And he made us as a class, and this is 110. This is just a basic class of trying to understand what Pete just said, relating to, you have all of these forces that manage the affairs of human beings. And then as these things are implemented, how do you use them? What is the order in which they are executed? And the premise back with Jim, and Jim Jacob, as I mentioned him, I think he's a good guy. He ordered it in such a way to make it very effective for us to understand. And he used political systems, comparative political systems, to out. And now he did not put a value judgment on which is best. And I appreciate the fact that he did it that way. I think it was the right way to do it. But he did it in such a way to remind us that power and order are those things that are up for grabs regarding the way the system of governance is established and runs on our planet. And what we fundamentally see here is evil now affecting that system of order, which then the order that is being established is using the power that they have available to them, in this case, social media, deception, the manipulation of thinking for purposes of establishing a new order, build back better. So it's quite insidious based on my experience as a political scientist. But one, as Jay said, they're thinking it very clearly. They're doing everything they can to establish this new world order in context of power and order for purposes of their dominance. And I hate to, again, I don't want to sound like I'm
right, and they're not fighting.
It is what it is.
And they're not competing with any organized group.
Right.
It's an organized group competing with no organized group. It's a war that only has one army.
Well, every once in a while, they do suffer a setback, and that comes at the hands of the American voter. Okay? And every time that happens, there are certain factions in the media and, of course, the international community that throw a fit. Do you remember when Ronald Reagan was elected president? And the New York Times wrote a big article about the inauguration ceremony as being something akin to a coronation. They were writing it like you almost, if you go back to it, you almost sound like you get the feeling they were seething and writing this story about Reagan's victory and the support he's been getting over the years, knowing that he was probably going to keep the support for the entire 2 terms. Cut to 2016. Americans are sick of the New World Order. They vote in Donald Trump. Of course, that's probably partially because the Democrats put maybe the worst candidate up in the history of their party. But that's just a matter of opinion. The idea is the American voter has been But the
Don't
American
say that,
voter,
you'll get killed. Don't say that, Chris.
good point. But the American voter has been the last line of defense, apparently, against the New World Order, and it's happened quite a few times.
No, and that's what I'm saying, that if you take the Second Amendment into consideration, at the same time, you realize that it's really the same kind of argument that's going on. The American voter is like the last bastion of power that they don't control. And if that guy has a gun, then that only adds to that power. So if they can strip the guns away from that guy and all he has is the vote, and they can play with the vote,
right?
It's over.
Right.
So the one thing that's very clear to me is that the Afghan militia, the Taliban, defeated the greatest military force on the planet, much like George Washington did against the British. We tend to forget our own history here. And yet somehow those weapons aren't effective. Oh, the U.S. government has far better weapons. People tend to forget that the U.S. military is quite small compared to the armed public. Just saying. And the idea that 250,000 people, and I would argue that you'd have a lot less if the powers that be ever directed the U.S. Army, U.S. military be used against civilian populations. I think you'd have a lot less in the numbers showing up. That arrogance by Biden saying that reflects on the fact that, yes, he's a fascist, and yes, that's where he wants to go. They're telling you exactly what they're trying to do, to Jay's point, removing firearms. So, sorry, Pete, I didn't mean to.
No, by the way, the Taliban is the answer to the riddle question of who is the only power to defeat both America and Russia? The Taliban.
Yeah.
Fair.
And one could argue that they also beat the British Empire.
They did.
Oh yes.
But it's important that people go back and remember is that when we start talking about these large corporations or the government collecting this sort of data, first off, the government doesn't have the authority. Governments don't have rights. Right. Governments have authority. Government doesn't have the authority to do this. This is an assumed power that clearly is contravening the direction of the Constitution. People will say, well, the private corporations have this power, or sometimes they'll say right. And the answer, in fact, is no, they don't. That data is owned by you. That data is yours. The data that you acquire through the day, through the week, through the year, that's your data. And it is incumbent upon the American people, if you want to figure out where you start to push back on this, it's incumbent upon us as individuals is to push back and say, that's not your data. That's my data. I own that data.
Right.
It's happened once or twice. When President Obama proposed the healthcare or the central health database,
right.
I believe it was I don't think that was the official title, but the idea was everybody's health information on the computer so any doctor can pull it up. The fact is the government can pull it up. A private interest can pull it up. That information can be used against you, whether you're dealing with hiring, and a lot of that information can get into the wrong hands in a lot of ways. But we said, no, this can't happen. That's a good thing. On the other hand, well, Easy Pass is out there. You can be tracked everywhere you drive, as long as you drive through certain areas. That we allowed because, once again, convenience, and it was easy. Pete, you brought up the driver's use tax. Some Democratic governors have decided, hey, if we're going to switch to hybrids and electric cars and people are going to be using less gas, we have to tax them somehow. But again, that's another way to track people down.
Right.
We still have to keep saying no. So while we said no in the past, we said yes a few times, but we have to go back and keep saying no. And that's where the American voter is the last line of defense against the World Economic Forum.
Well,
if you're going to trust the EU, I don't think so. Maybe Hungary will help us.
To that point, Chris, I think this is part of our challenge as a think tank and the new initiative we're now building. Pete's going to be the chairman of the board, by the way, just saying. And the idea is to help people recognize what we're talking about here. You have the right to your own data. People have been tricked into giving it up through convenience, through security, through the belief that somehow you're helping by diminishing your own independence. And I think that's one of the things that we want to help people reclaim is their right to their data. Their data is an extension of who they are. We now live in a digital world, and it happens. I don't want to say it happened quickly, because we've all seen it coming. I mean, some of us have been working this literally since the 1990s when it was developing. But the problem is, we as a minority have been trying to point this out as it basically infiltrated every aspect of society, with people not recognizing what their rights are, what their individual God-given rights are in context of this new technology.
And you should view that. You should view that data about where you've been, who you're talking to, what you bought. That is as personal as your health data.
Right.
And that's how it should be viewed.
Absolutely. So just say no to this the CO2 personal tracker, especially if they put something in orifices that require, orifices. Just say it. It's not a good idea. Just say it.
If given the opportunity, everybody who's listening, you need to push back to the car manufacturers about this idea of having cars made that the government can access the data, et cetera, et cetera. Automatic kill switches, remote kill switches, et cetera. People need to push back and say, we don't want that in our cars. And they need to write their congressman. They need to, cause a stir, make a fit, say, no, that's a bad idea.
Michael Hastings found out the hard way about kill switches, so to speak. Just saying.
Thank you for being with us for this special Great Reset Roundtable edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. Please remember to hit that like button. Feel free to comment on our discussion. We appreciate your thoughts. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our Thought to Action channel and pound the big red bell if you're on YouTube for updates on future shows. Find out more about the London Center on our website, londoncenter.org. And if you'd like to help us continue to create discussions and programming like this, please join us on Patreon, patreon.com/thought-to-action. You can enjoy sneak previews, special exclusive content, and our Ask Us Anything sessions. Also, you can help us greatly by sharing this video with your friends, colleagues, and social networks. That would really help us out. Share these and other videos that you like. Also, pick up some of our cool merch from the Thought to Action Teespring store. We'll be adding new items again, as we always do. The link is in our video and podcast descriptions. For our panel at the Herb London Center for Policy Research, I'm Chris Cordani. Thank you, stay informed, and make your day a great one.